My mother cheated me at the reception. My quiet legal revenge froze the house and ended her reign. My name is Ava Monroe. At 34, I had built a life based on precision, on the verifiable mathematics of load-bearing walls and the non-negotiable honesty of a waterline. As the lead waterfront designer and co-owner of Green Line Atelier, I did not just build structures, I designed systems that lasted. My world was one of blueprints, permits, and the tangible reality of steel and reclaimed timber. Today, all that precision was supposed to be in service of joy. I was marrying Liam Hart on the terrace lawn of a historic Lake Washington estate. The air smelled of cedar and late-season roses, and the water beyond the lawn was a sheet of polished gray-blue steel, reflecting the soft Seattle sky. Liam's hand, warm and steady in mine, was the only anchor I needed. His vows, spoken without a tremor, had been about partnership, about building a life as intentionally as I designed a cantilevered roof. We were a good team. He was a pragmatic and brilliant software architect. I was a designer who believed function created its own beauty. We were celebrating not with a horde, but with 150 people, clients, colleagues, the partners at Green Line, and our families. Liam's parents, Robert and Elena Hart, had already given us their blessing in the most profound way. They were people who understood me. They saw my work, respected it, and did not just tolerate my ambition. They admired it. Their wedding gift, presented to us privately the night before at the rehearsal dinner, was a stunning modern shoreline cottage on Hood Canal. More than just a house, it was a commission. They had purchased the land and funded the entire project based on a design portfolio I developed, a personal project I had never thought would be built. It was my design. From the structural insulated panels to the custom-milled cabinetry, it was meant to be our sanctuary and my flagship residential project. It was, Elena had said, her voice thick with affection, a home built by you for you. Now the reception was in full swing. The jazz trio was finishing a set, their bass line thrumming pleasantly under the murmur of conversation and the clinking of champagne flutes. The light was perfect, that golden hour that videographers dream of, and I could see our main cameraman, Ben, panning across the smiling faces. I leaned my head on Liam's shoulder, a moment of pure, unguarded peace. And then the music stopped, not a fade, but an abrupt scratch and a pop of feedback from the speakers. I turned. My mother, Margot Monroe, was at the band's microphone. Margot, the perennial chair of the Harbor Arts Alliance, was a woman who existed in a state of perfectly curated social radiance. Her silver blonde hair was swept into a flawless chignon. Her couture dress, a pale dove gray that was just a shade too close to white for a mother of the bride, shimmered. She held a champagne flute in one hand and the microphone in the other, tapping it with a perfectly manicured nail. "If I could have everyone's attention just for a moment," she trilled. Her voice, practiced from years of charity auctions and gala speeches, cut through the air. The crowd hushed, expecting a heartfelt toast. Liam's father, Robert, who had already given his speech, glanced at Elena with a small, confused frown. I felt Liam's hand find mine under the table. His thumb brushed my knuckles, a small, anxious signal. "Thank you all for being here," Margot began, beaming a 1,000-watt smile that did not reach her eyes. "It's just so wonderful to see two families, the Monroes and the Harts, coming together." She raised her glass toward Robert and Elena. "And the Harts have been so incredibly generous. Truly a breathtaking gift." A polite murmur of agreement. I felt my stomach tighten. This was not the plan. This was not on the schedule. "Robert and Elena," Margot continued, "gifted our happy couple the most divine cottage on the canal, a testament to Ava's work, of course." She paused, letting the grandeur of the gift settle over the guests, and then she plunged the knife. "However," she said, her tone shifting to one of magnanimous, sober practicality, "Liam and Ava are so busy. Green Line is taking off. Liam's work is so demanding, they're city people. And in speaking with them, we've all agreed, a collective fictional we, that such a property needs to be used to be truly lived in and appreciated." My blood went cold. I could feel the heat draining from my face. I did not look at Liam. I watched my mother. Ava's sister, Sloane, as many of you know, is the founder of the wonderful lifestyle brand Sloane House Harbor. Margot gestured to my older sister, who was sitting at a nearby table, looking down with a practiced beatific modesty. "Sloane needs a place to create. to build her community, to inspire. It is quite simply a perfect fit for her brand's new studio. A sharp collective intake of breath rippled across the lawn. It was a sound I would never forget. And so, Margot concluded, raising her glass high, we are just so thrilled to announce that the cottage is being formally transferred to Sloane to serve as her creative headquarters. It's a wonderful solution that serves the entire family's needs. To family. The silence that followed was deafening. It lasted 3 full seconds. Then the phones came up, not for photos but for video. Dozens of blue-lit screens tilted toward the head table, toward me. Guests were exchanging shocked, wide-eyed glances across the lawn. I saw a waiter freeze, a tray of appetizers hovering, forgotten, in his hand. The venue coordinator was staring at Margot, her mouth slightly open, her headset crackling with unheard instructions. This was not an announcement. It was a public execution. My sister Sloane finally looked up. She offered a small apologetic shrug to the room, as if this was all a bit embarrassing but necessary. She then caught my eye and, with the perfect insouciance of a favored child, chirped just loud enough for our table to hear, "Relax, Ava. It's just a house." Just a house. A house I had designed. A house given to me and my husband. A house that was the physical manifestation of my in-law's respect for me. I saw the move. I saw it with the sharp, cold clarity of an architect reviewing a flawed structural drawing. This was not about the house. It was about the humiliation. Margot had done this here, now, on my wedding day, in front of everyone to make any protest impossible. If I spoke up, I was a petty, grasping, ungrateful bride. If I corrected her, I was ruining my own wedding over a thing. If I cried, I was hysterical. She had built a trap and baited it with my own joy. She had created a public narrative where she was the practical, loving matriarch balancing family needs, and I was the spoiled child who had too much. My lungs felt like they were packed with concrete. I felt the vibration before I heard the sound. Liam squeezing my hand under the table, his grip iron hard. He leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. His voice was a low, steady rumble. "Smile," he whispered. "Do not give her the scene. Smile! We'll handle this, but not here." He was right. This was a performance. Margot had seized the stage, but I would not play the part she had written for me. I drew in a breath. It felt ragged, but I steadied it. I turned my head from Sloane, from Margot, and looked at Liam. I forced the corners of my mouth to lift. I looked at him, and only at him, pouring every ounce of love and trust I had into that one look. Then I turned back to my mother, who was still smiling, triumphant, waiting for the applause that was not coming. I raised my own glass. My hand was perfectly steady. "Fine," I said. The word was quiet, but in the amplified silence, it carried. It was not agreement. It was not forgiveness. It was a promissory note. Margot's smile faltered just for a fraction of a second. She had expected tears or rage. She did not know what to do with fine. On cue, as if Liam had willed it, the band leader, a seasoned pro who clearly recognized a social catastrophe when he saw one, struck a chord. The gentle, familiar opening notes of Etta James's at last washed over the lawn, breaking the terrible tension. Liam stood up and held out his hand to me. "I believe this is our dance, Mrs. Hart." I let him pull me to my feet. I did not look at Margot. I did not look at Sloane. I did not look at the 150 phones still pointed our way. I walked with my husband to the center of the dance floor. He pulled me close, his arm a steel band around my waist, his other hand enveloping mine. I rested my head against his chest, shutting my eyes for just 1 second, breathing in the scent of his cologne and the starched cotton of his shirt. "You okay?" he murmured into my hair. "No," I whispered back, my voice muffled against his lapel. "But I will be." I opened my eyes. I was a designer. I was trained to see a room in 3 dimensions, to understand its structure, its sightlines, its weak points. As Liam began to move us in a slow, graceful circle, my gaze swept the estate. Margot thought she had used the audience as her weapon. She was an amateur. I saw Ben, the lead videographer, still filming. His lens was tight on us, but I knew the high-definition boom mic over the bandstand was capturing everything. I saw his second shooter positioned near the bar, who had a perfect clear angle on the head table, capturing Margot's entire speech and Sloane's dismissive chirp. And then I saw the device that was mine. On the corner of the guest book table, nestled discreetly between a floral arrangement and a stack of programs, was a small black tabletop GoPro. I had personally okayed its placement with the videographer, wanting to capture candid time-lapse footage of the guests arriving and mingling. It was 10 feet from Margot. It had a direct, unobstructed view of her face. It was network-connected. It was recording. Margot had built her entire play on public perception, on shame, on the idea that what happened in front of witnesses was too messy to fight. She did not understand. I did not live in a world of perception. I lived in a world of evidence. She had just handed me every single thing I needed, every word, every reaction, every witness. My mother had set a trap with ribbons and roses. She had no idea that every toast, every camera angle, and every table microphone was admissible. Liam spun me slowly, and I smiled. It was a real smile now, cold and sharp and full of lethal precision. The hit was public, the fallout would be clinical. We did not leave the wedding. We stayed until the last guest departed, cutting the cake with the same silver knife Margot had used at her own wedding. Our smiles plastered on for the cameras. We danced, we accepted congratulations, and we waved goodbye as our car pulled away from the estate, the image of perfect, happy newlyweds. The silence in the car was absolute, broken only by the sound of the tires on the rain-slicked pavement of the I-90 floating bridge. Heading back into Seattle, we were not going to the airport for a honeymoon. We were going to our condo, a minimalist space of concrete, glass, and steel overlooking Elliott Bay. Liam had not let go of my hand since the dance. He carried me over the threshold, a tradition that felt absurd under the circumstances. The moment he set me down in the foyer, the facade shattered. I did not cry. I unzipped the layers of ivory silk and lace, stepping out of the dress and leaving it in a heap on the floor. Liam was already in the kitchen, pouring 2 large glasses of water. He handed one to me. "Your father," Liam said, his voice flat, "did not look at you once. He just stayed at the bar. He ordered a Macallan 18 right after Margot's speech and did not move." I nodded, pulling my laptop from my satchel. That's his pattern. Daniel is a compliance witness. He exists to provide the illusion of a second opinion, but his only action is non-intervention. I sat at our large quartz island, the laptop's logo glowing in the dim light. He's irrelevant. Margot is the actor, Sloane is the beneficiary. "So," Liam said, leaning against the counter, his tie and jacket now discarded. "Talk to me, Ava. What was that smile I saw on the dance floor? You saw something." "I saw a trap," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up file structures from my secure server. Margot built a cage of public opinion. She thinks she's won. She thinks this is a family drama that she can bully me into submission and embarrass your parents into silence. She does not know what the gift actually is, he said, the realization dawning. Exactly. I pulled up the core document. She thinks Robert and Elena bought a house and handed us the keys. She thinks it's a simple deed transfer she can browbeat us into changing. I turned the laptop screen toward him. This is the Hart Family Settlement Trust F12. The cottage, the land, the structure, it all sits inside this. Robert and Elena did not gift us a house. They named Liam Hart and Ava Monroe as the designated beneficiaries of this specific trust asset. I highlighted a section. And the asset does not vest, the title does not transfer to us until 2 conditions are met. First, the official recording of our marriage license with the county. That will not happen until we file it, likely tomorrow. And second, I tapped the screen, my own signed and notarized professional occupancy affidavit, attesting that I am occupying the space to further the architectural work it was designed for. I have not signed that. I have not even drafted it. So, it's not ours yet, Liam clarified. It's not. It's still held by the trust. And Margot and Sloane, they are legal strangers to this entire instrument. What Margot did tonight was not a transfer. It was an announcement of intent to commit a crime. I scrolled down to another clause, one I had read and admired for its sheer legal elegance. And this, I said, is the kill switch, the reversion clause. I'll summarize. Any third-party claim, public misrepresentation, or attempt to encumber the title before the vesting conditions are met triggers an automatic immediate freeze on the asset and initiates a full title audit by the trust's attorneys. Liam's eyes went wide. A public misrepresentation. Like, say, I said, my voice cold, hijacking a microphone at a wedding in front of 150 witnesses and multiple cameras, and falsely announcing the asset is being transferred to a third party. He let out a low whistle. She did not just walk into the trap, she cannonballed into it. She gave us the trigger, but that's just their lock. I have my own keys. I navigated to a different server. The Green Line Atelier IP registry. Margot thinks it's just a house. Sloane thinks it's her creative studio. They're both wrong. It's a copyrighted work of architecture. I pulled up the certificates from the U.S. Copyright Office. The complete design under 17 U.S. Code Section 102. The plans, the elevations, every schematic, even the custom millwork and the built-in furniture. It's all registered to me, Ava Monroe, as the architect of record and licensed to Green Line for promotional use. Sloane cannot use it as her brand headquarters. She cannot photograph it for commercial use. She cannot post a single image of it to her Sloane House Harbor Instagram feed without my express written permission. If she does, she's committing willful infringement. She'll change it, Liam said immediately. She'll paint it beige and fill it with her sponsored linen pillows and call it her own. She cannot, I said, pulling up the third document. She cannot even hammer a nail to hang one of those pillows. It was a copy of the Shoreline Use Covenant filed with the county. It's a waterfront property in a sensitive ecological area. I filed a binding covenant that runs with the land. Any alteration to the structure, foundation, or even material finishes, any alteration requires the original architect of record sign-off to ensure compliance with the environmental and design standards. I looked at him. I am the architect of record forever. The house is a fortress. Liam and Margot just tried to hand the keys to an invader, while I was the only one with the blueprints and the codes. Liam just stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. Okay, what's the first move, Mrs. Hart? Evidence. I picked up my phone. My contract with Ben, the videographer, has a Section 4.B evidence preservation addendum. It's a standard clause I put in all my firm's media contracts. It stipulates that all raw footage, including all audio feeds, is preserved with embedded time codes and a clear chain of custody log for 30 days, and that we have a right to immediate retrieval of any and all clips for archival or legal purposes. I sent a text to Ben. Amazing work tonight. Quick request, I need the raw feed from camera 2 and the main audio board, specifically the 8:15 p.m. to 8:25 p.m. segment. Please export and upload to the secure Dropbox folder we used for the contract, sending this as a formal request per 4.B. Thanks. My phone pinged 2 minutes later. On it, Ava. Weird speech. You'll have the file in 20. Done, I said, now the escrow officer. I opened my email. The file from Ben was already uploading. I waited. When it was finished, I downloaded the 4K clip of Margot's speech. The audio was crystal clear. The boom mic had picked up every syllable, every gasp, and even Sloane's chirped, "Relax. It's just a house." I drafted a new email to the escrow officer's email from Ava Monroe Hart. Subject, Potential Cloud on Title Hart Family Settlement Trust F12. Dear Ms. Alvarez, my apologies for the late hour. An issue has arisen that may constitute a significant cloud on the title for the property held in Trust F12, pending the finalization of my marriage vesting. At my wedding reception this evening, a public declaration was made by a third party, Margot Monroe, claiming the property was being transferred to another third party, Sloane Monroe. This is, of course, a material falsehood, but it was made publicly. Attached, please find a time-stamped video clip of the declaration, as per the terms of the trust, specifically the reversion clause regarding public misrepresentation. Please consider this formal notice. I request that you freeze all vesting procedures and initiate the title audit stipulated in the trust agreement. I will be in touch with my attorney in the morning. Regards, Ava Monroe Hart. I hit send. The machine was now in motion. The automatic freeze was engaged. Margot's microphone stunt had just blocked her own daughter from ever taking possession. The house was now locked down, pending an audit I had the evidence for. I took a deep breath and opened my texts. I had one from Elena, Liam's mother. Ava. Darling, I am horrified. We are on our way home. Please call us. Whatever the hour, we will fix this. This is not what we wanted for you. I typed back a reply. Elena, please do not worry. And please do not call Margot. You and Robert gave us the most perfect, thoughtful gift in the world. What happened tonight was ugly, but it was not legally binding. I am handling it. The documents are on our side. Please enjoy your drive, and we will talk tomorrow. Just remember, paper beats microphones. I sent it. Liam was watching me, a look of profound, quiet pride on his face. What now? He asked. Now, I said, we see what the other side is doing. He opened his laptop and navigated to Instagram. It took less than 30 seconds. Sloane's feed was quiet, but her friends were not. We clicked on the story of a lifestyle blogger who had been at their table. A shaky video of Margot's speech, clearly captioned, OMG, Margot Monroe is a savage. She just gave Sloane the new waterfront house at her sister's wedding. The next story was a selfie of the blogger with Sloane clinking champagne glasses. The text over it, celebrating Sloane House Harbor's new waterfront studio. So deserved. Cannot wait for the reveal. She's already branding it, Liam said, his voice laced with disgust. Good, I said. She's establishing intent. My phone dinged, a notification from a domain monitoring service I used for work. And there it is, I said, showing Liam the screen. The domain SloaneHarborStudio.com was registered 6 weeks ago. The countdown timer on its landing page, which was set to go live in 2 days, was just updated. It now says the reveal coming tomorrow. She planned this, Liam whispered. Margot planned to use your wedding as a launch party for Sloane's brand. She needed a stage. I said she needed to legitimize Sloane's claim by stealing my work and your parents' generosity. And she did it in a forum where she thought I was emotionally compromised and socially trapped. I pointed to Liam's screen. Screenshot every single post, every story, every comment. Use the browser extension, the one that captures the full page and embeds the UTC timestamp and source code. Save them as PDFs. Archive them to the cold storage drive. Label the folder evidence 2025-108 misattribution. For the next hour, we worked in silent, perfect synchronicity. The sounds were not of a wedding night, but of a strategy room, the quiet click of a mouse, the tapping of keys, the soft hum of the server archiving files. Margot and Sloane were probably asleep, drunk on champagne and victory, believing they had just pulled off the perfect social coup. They had no idea that in a condo across the water, a designer and an architect were laying the foundation for their complete and total dismantling. The paperwork was filed, the evidence was secure, the first charges were set. By the next morning, the emotional shockwave of the wedding had receded, leaving behind a landscape of crystalline clarity. There was no grief, no lingering sting of humiliation. There was only the cold, quiet hum of a complex problem waiting to be solved. Liam and I moved with the practiced efficiency of a team that had worked together for years. He handled the logistics, canceling our honeymoon flights, arranging for my wedding dress to be professionally cleaned and stored, fielding the first wave of confused texts from friends with a placid, Ava and I are just taking a few quiet days at home. I was in my studio. My studio is the truest part of our condo, a glass-walled room overlooking the Puget Sound where ferries slid like silent gray ghosts across the water. It was a space of order. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling whiteboard currently covered in schematics for a floating restaurant. Another held meticulously organized material samples, brushed bronze, blackened steel, slabs of veined marble, blocks of cross-laminated timber. My desk was a single vast slab of polished concrete, holding only my monitor, keyboard, and a Wacom tablet. This was my command center. This was where I broke down complex systems into their component parts. My family, I realized, was just another complex system, and my mother was its chief, fatally flawed structural engineer. I opened a new project file on my computer. I did not label it Revenge or the Takedown. I labeled it Project Legacy. This was not about emotion. This was about correcting a series of profound, long-standing design flaws. The first step in any project is understanding the site history. I created a new document, Pattern Analysis MRO Historical Redistributions. My fingers moved over the keyboard not with anger but with the dispassionate precision of an archivist. I began to list them. Item: the Atherton Design Scholarship 2007. I was a high school senior. I had won it for a portfolio of architectural drawings. It was a full-ride scholarship to the University of Washington's College of Built Environments. Margot, as a prominent arts patron, had a word with the selection committee. She suggested that while my technical skill was admirable, Sloane's emerging talent in arts administration and curation was equally vital to the community. The scholarship was split. I got tuition. Sloane received a generous stipend for a curatorial internship in Paris that summer, which consisted mostly of her populating an Instagram account with photos of herself in museums. It was the first time my success had been siphoned off to fund her lifestyle. The first redistribution. Item: Seattle Design Magazine Feature 2015. My first major solo project, a pro bono redesign of a dilapidated community center, was getting press. A feature was planned. Margot intervened. She convinced the editor that the real story was about the Monroe family's legacy of civic engagement. The final article was a glossy profile of Margot's philanthropy and Sloane's effortless style, featuring a single photo of me standing awkwardly in the background of a building I had poured my soul into. My name was mentioned once in the photo caption. Sloane was quoted extensively on the importance of creating beautiful spaces for the underprivileged. Item: the Kenwood Donation 2019. A wealthy retired couple, former clients of Green Line, were so impressed with my design for their waterfront home that they wanted to fund a similar, smaller-scale project for a local women's shelter I championed. They mentioned it to Margot at a charity luncheon. Margot smoothly redirected their 7-figure donation. Instead of going to the shelter's capital fund, the money was funneled into the Monroe Civic Fund, a family foundation, to underwrite a gala. The gala's theme: Women in Design. The chair of the event was Margot. The honorary co-chair, who received a Rising Star Award, was Sloane. The shelter got a table at the back. The list went on. A dozen small cuts, a dozen quiet thefts of credit and capital, all executed with the plausible deniability of a mother just helping her children. But the pattern was undeniable. Sloane was not a founder. She was a brand built on a foundation of my work, subsidized by my achievements and marketed by our mother. I took the data and did what I do with site analysis. I created a visual overlay, a timeline heat map in Green Line signature forest green. I plotted my project completions, my awards, my press mentions in a sickly, saccharine shade of blush pink. I plotted Margot's major social victories: her appointment to the Harbor Arts Alliance Board, the galas she chaired, the society pages she appeared in. The correlation was parasitic. The week I won the regional AIA award, Margot secured the chair for the annual museum benefit. The month Green Line was featured in a national architecture journal. Margot was named Philanthropist of the Year. My wins were the fuel for her ascent. She was not just redistributing the spoils to Sloane. She was using the heat from my career to fire her own social kiln. The Monroe Civic Fund. That was the nexus, the vehicle. It was our grandfather's legacy, meant to provide modest grants for public arts and green spaces. I had not thought about it in years. I navigated to the shared family digital archives, a repository of legal and financial documents I rarely accessed. I found the fund's original 1998 charter. The language was clear, written by a man who, like me, believed in structure. Governance was to be managed by a neutral third-party trustee, a partner at his old law firm, to prevent conflicts of interest. Then I found a file from 2017, a scanned family office memo signed by my father, Daniel, as a witness. It documented a board vote, a board of 3, Margot, Daniel, and a retiring trustee, moving the governance of the fund directly under Margot's control. It cited efficiency and the need for a more hands-on philanthropic approach. It was a quiet internal coup, a direct violation of the charter's spirit and letter. Margot had not just taken over the family's social life. She had seized its financial engine. Liam came into the studio, placing a fresh mug of coffee on my desk. He looked at the screen, at the list of grievances, at the damning 2017 memo. He pointed to the domain registration for Sloane's website I had pulled up the night before. She registered the site 6 weeks ago, he said, his voice a low rumble. The website had a countdown timer. She had a launch plan. She knew the house was coming. She needed a stage. She used your wedding for the premiere. That was it. The final clarifying piece. This was not a spontaneous act of maternal cruelty. This was a calculated business launch executed on a stage I had paid for with an asset she had stolen in front of an audience of my colleagues and clients. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard. I erased the restaurant schematics with long, clean swipes of the eraser until the entire surface was a pristine, empty white. I picked up a black marker. The cap clicked off with a sound like a chambered round. Every structure has load-bearing supports, I said, thinking aloud. Points of failure. If you want to dismantle a building, you do not start swinging a sledgehammer. You identify the supports and you weaken them surgically in the right order. I drew 4 large boxes on the board. In each, I wrote one of Margot's supports: reputation, public image, donor trust, board seats, institutional power, Sloan's credibility, borrowed, fraudulent, civic fund, financial engine. These are the pillars, I told Liam. We take them out, and the whole rotten structure collapses. Beneath them, I wrote my project plan, a simple 3-phase process like any design-build project. Phase 1, expose. Phase 2, unseat. Phase 3, reclaim. I started mapping the first steps. I was not just listing actions. I was creating a project management chart. Each action item was assigned a permit-like checklist. Action 1.1, freeze asset. Evidence, wedding AV file timestamped, statutory hook, Hart Family Trust F12 reversion clause. Stakeholder map, escrow officer Alvarez, Hart Trust Council. Status, complete. Action 1.2, neutralize Sloan's branding. Evidence, copyright registration 17 USC Section 102, social media archives UTC stamped. Statutory hook, copyright infringement, misattribution, unfair business practices. Stakeholder map, Green Line IP Council, Sloan Monroe. Status, pending. I continued this process for every vulnerability, every point of attack. The Shoreline Covenant, the potential ethics violations on the Harbor Arts Alliance Board, the fraudulent governance of the Civic Fund. Each one was a clear, defined work package with its own evidence, its own legal justification, and its own list of involved parties. I stood back and looked at the board. It was a demolition plan, cold, methodical, unstoppable. Then I added 2 final lines at the bottom of the board under the heading Project Parameters. 1. Boundary rule. No collateral damage. The staff at these charities, the donors who gave in good faith, the junior employees at the venue, they are not targets. They are to be protected. This operation is confined to the principals, Margot, Sloan, and if necessary, Daniel. 2. Communication protocol. All communication with principals will be conducted via legal counsel or formal written correspondence only. No phone calls, no in-person meetings, paper only. I would not be drawn into a screaming match. I would not engage in a tearful confrontation. I would not give Margot the emotional drama she craved and thrived on. She wanted to play checkers in the town square. I was going to play chess on the astral plane, and she would not even see the pieces moving until she was already in checkmate. I set the marker down. The rage was gone. The hurt was gone. They had been replaced by the clean, exhilarating focus of a designer with a new commission. My mother had spent a lifetime building a facade. I was about to show her what happens when a real architect conducts a structural audit. The first email arrived at 8:02 a.m. on Monday. It was from Ms. Alvarez, the escrow officer. It was like all good professional communication, brief and devoid of emotion. Subject, re-potential cloud on title Hart Family Settlement Trust F12. Ms. Monroe Hart, thank you for forwarding the documentation. Based on the potential for misrepresentation as stipulated in the trust agreement, we have placed an administrative freeze on the vesting process for the asset pending a full title audit by Trust Counsel. All parties, including the original trusters, have been notified of this action. I read the email twice. Administrative freeze. Margot's grand public gesture, her attempt to seize the narrative, had resulted in the immediate implementation of a legal blockade. She had personally triggered the very mechanism that now prevented anyone, including her, Sloan, or even Liam and me, from touching the property. She had, in effect, locked the steel door and handed me the only key. The asset was secure. Phase 1.1 was complete. I forwarded the email to Liam with a single word: anchored. The rest of the morning was dedicated to Phase 1.2. I was not at my Green Line office. I was in the downtown tower office of Michael Cale, Green Line's intellectual property counsel. Michael was sharp, gray-suited, and utterly relentless. He had spent the last 24 hours reviewing the packet I had sent him Sunday night, my copyright certificates, the archived social media posts, the domain registration for Sloane House Harbor, and the live cached version of her website. He pushed a document across the polished mahogany table. "This is the cease and desist. It's not a request, Ava. It's a notification of impending action." I read the language. It was beautiful in its brutality. It named Sloane Monroe and her shell LLC, Sloane House Harbor, as the respondents. It cited by number my architectural copyright registrations. It accused her of direct copyright infringement for any planned commercial use of the cottage's image, which was a derivative of my copyrighted architectural work, contributory infringement for encouraging her followers, the blogger army, to create and distribute infringing images, false attribution, unfair competition, Lanham Act for creating a brand that explicitly and intentionally misled the public into believing she was the creative force behind the design. "The branded reels are the most damning," Michael said, pointing to a screenshot of a blogger's post. "Her claim to the studio is a commercial claim. She's monetizing my client's work. The C&D gives her 48 hours to scrub her entire digital presence of any mention of the property, any image of it, and any claim to it. It also demands a full accounting of any contracts or sponsorships she may have signed, using the property as a basis." "She will not take it seriously," I said. "She will think it's just me being litigious. She will call Margot." "I know." Michael smiled thinly. "That's why this is just the appetizer. The main course is this." He handed me a second file, a formal complaint for deceptive trade practices. "I filed it with the State Attorney General's office an hour ago." I looked at the cover sheet. "What's the basis?" "Simple name confusion. Your firm, Green Line Atelier, has a decade of goodwill and a registered trade dress associated with Pacific Northwest sustainable shoreline design. Her brand, Sloane House Harbor, was stood up last month, and according to our analysis has copied over 60% of the sustainability and mission statement language directly from the Green Line website. We're not just alleging she's stealing your house, we're alleging she's stealing your corporate identity to do it." This was new. This was beyond the family drama. This was a corporate-level attack on her entire flimsy brand. "This," I said, holding the complaint, "is perfect. It's on the public docket now." Michael said, "It's not a private letter, it's a government filing. She will be served by the end of the day." I left his office and walked back toward the waterfront. The air was cool, smelling of salt and coffee. My phone was buzzing. It was a text from Liam. "They're celebrating." He attached a screenshot from Instagram, Sloane and Margot toasting with mimosas at a brunch spot. The caption, "Big things coming. Honored to have the support of my family." They had no idea. The C&D would not be served for hours. The escrow freeze was a quiet, back-end process. They were still drunk on Saturday's victory, completely unaware that the first 2 missiles were already in the air. Back in my studio, I executed the next 2 items on my project board. First, the Shoreline Permitting Office. I drafted a careful email. I wrote, not as Ava Monroe, the daughter, but as Ava Monroe, architect of record and co-owner of Green Line Atelier. Subject, potential unpermitted commercial activity. Property address to the permitting office. As the architect of record for the above-referenced shoreline parcel, I am writing to alert you to potential unpermitted activity. It has come to my attention via public social media posts, see attached screenshots, that a third party is claiming this single-family residence as a creative studio and brand headquarters, Sloane House Harbor LLC, and is implying a studio build-out is forthcoming. As you know, this property is in a critical shoreline area, and my covenant filed with the deed, refiling number, expressly forbids alterations without AO sign-off. Furthermore, any change of use from residential to commercial would require a new application, which I have not been party to. I would be grateful if you could confirm that no such permits have been applied for or issued. I hit send. I was not accusing. I was a concerned professional upholding regulations. I was helping them do their job. The response would be an inspector. Second, The venue. I called their corporate counsel, a woman I had negotiated with on the event contract. "Hi," I said, my voice calm and friendly. "I am calling about the Hart-Monroe wedding. We had a wonderful time, but there was a small discrepancy during the reception speeches regarding a gift. For our records, I need to formally invoke Section 4.B of our contract and request a preservation hold on all AV. I was specific. I do not just mean the videographer's footage. I need the raw feed from the DJ's mixing board. I need the table mic feeds. And crucially, I need the lobby and entrance security camera footage from 8:00 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. "The lobby?" she asked, confused. "Yes, I need to establish the precise chain of custody for who approached the band, who handed off the microphone, and when. Just preserving the record." I let the legal implication hang in the air. "I understand," she said, her voice turning crisp. "I will have our ops team secure the footage immediately." Now, for Margot's pillar, the Harbor Arts Alliance. This required a different touch. It could not come from me. I finalized the packet I had assembled. It was a simple damning matrix. In one column, a list of donations made to the Monroe Civic Fund, specifically those redirected from other causes. In the next column, the dates those donations were spent, not on grants, but on galas and administrative fees. The final column listed the vendors paid for those fees, catering companies, PR firms, event planners. All of them were owned by Margot's closest friends, the same women who sat on her gala committees. It was a closed loop of self-dealing. I printed it at a commercial print shop, paid in cash, and mailed it from a post office across town, addressed to the lead independent director of the Alliance. It was completely anonymous, but an anonymous tip can be easily dismissed. It needed a guide. I called my friend Sarah, a senior compliance officer at a major bank. She owed me for a pro bono design I had done for her nonprofit. "Sarah," I said, "I have a hypothetical." I explained the structure, a board, a powerful vice chair, an anonymous tip showing clear self-dealing. "Easy," Sarah said. "The board has a fiduciary duty to investigate. The second they receive the tip, the vice chair must be recused from all financial discussions, and an independent audit must be called. If they do not, every other board member is legally liable." "Could you put that in writing?" I asked. "In the form of a best practices decision tree. What a board's duty is for you." "Ava, give me an hour." An hour later, a crisp, impersonal PDF was in my inbox titled Decision Tree for Fiduciary Governance. It did not mention Margot or the Alliance. It was just a clear, frightening checklist of legal responsibilities and potential liabilities. Sarah, using a blind email account, sent it to the same independent director. The packet was the accusation. The decision tree was the weapon. The first crack appeared at 6:05 p.m. My phone lit up with a notification, a direct message on Instagram. It was from Sloan. Sloan Monroe. "Hey, just got some crazy legal letter. Margot's furious. This is insane. We're family. Just call me. I am sure we can split usage of the studio." She still thought it was hers. She still thought splitting was an option. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it almost made me laugh. My reply, sent from the same platform, was cold. I did not call Ava Monroe. Splitting usage is not a legal term. My counsel is handling all communication. However, if you wish to formalize a request as a potential tenant, please provide my attorney with the following documents by close of business tomorrow. 1. Your Washington State UBI and LLC registration. 2. Your certificate of commercial liability insurance for the parcel. 3. The stamped architectural plans for your studio build-out. 4. The approved shoreline permits for change of use residential to commercial. 5. The approved permits for any structural or non-structural alterations. I hit send. The silence on her end was immediate. She had none of it. She did not even know what half of it meant. She was not a founder. She was a child playing dress-up in my professional world, and I had just handed her the bill. The final domino of the day fell at 7:30 p.m. Liam was home. We were quietly eating at the kitchen island when my phone pinged. It was a forwarded email from my father. Daniel, the non-intervener, had finally been forced to intervene. The original email was from the Alliance's board counsel, addressed to Margot and CCing Daniel as a family office representative. Subject, Special Session, Board of Directors. Margot. The board is convening a special mandatory session this Wednesday at 4 p.m. This is pursuant to our bylaws section 8.c. The topic is a review of the Monroe Civic Fund's governance and recent vendor disbursements. Please come prepared to discuss the 2017 governance change and all catering and event invoices from the last 30 to 6 months. We will be moving to recuse you from this portion of the meeting pending an independent review. Daniel had forwarded it to me without comment. He did not need to. Margot's world, which had seemed so unassailable on Saturday, was now under attack from 4 different directions: escrow, the state AG, the county permit office, and her own board. I put my phone down and continued eating. "How's the Riverwalk project?" Liam asked. "Good," I said, a small, real smile touching my lips. The city liked our Phase 2 sustainability plan. We're moving on to the final schematics. The work proceeded unhindered. Sloane's response to my document request was not a document. It was a digital declaration of war. 2 days after my DM on Wednesday afternoon, the same day Margot was scheduled for her special session with the Alliance Board, my phone lit up with a notification. Sloane Monroe is going live on Instagram. Liam and I watched it on the large monitor in my studio. Her defiance was breathtaking. She was not just ignoring the cease and desist, she was actively, flagrantly violating it. And she was doing it from inside the cottage. She must have either picked the lock or, more likely, Margot had bullied the Hart's original builder into giving her a spare key. It did not matter. The administrative freeze meant she was at that moment trespassing in a property held in trust. The video feed was shaky, then stabilized. There she was, artfully disheveled in a cream-colored cashmere sweater, sitting in the custom-built window nook I had designed. My nook, the one with the mitered glass corner window overlooking the canal, framed in Douglas fir I had personally sourced. "Hey, everyone," she breathed, tucking her hair behind her ear. "Wow, so many of you are joining. I wanted to come on and speak from the heart. There's been so much noise lately. I wanted to show you the truth. Welcome." She paused, sweeping the camera in a slow, loving arc. "To my creative studio." The comments flooded in, a rapid-fire scroll of adulation. "OMG, it's gorgeous. You deserve this. Queen, architect queen. Such vision. Cannot wait for the new Sloane House Harbor line from here." She smiled, a beatific, martyred smile. "Thank you. It's been a dream. A real sanctuary to create." She was monetizing it right there on a live feed, associating her brand directly with my copyrighted work. I was already taking a high-resolution screen recording. "She's handing us the tro on a silver platter," I murmured. "Wait," Liam said, pointing to the comment feed. "Look." A new set of comments began to appear, polite, pointed, and surgical. They were from names I recognized, junior architects at other firms, design bloggers I had done interviews with, even one of my old professors, my network. They had seen the public filings. Design Prof W, beautiful millwork. Who was the architect of record AOR for the project? Sloane's eyes flickered to the comment, but she ignored it. "Seattle Build. This is a critical shoreline area. Were you able to get the permits for a commercial change of use? Our firm has found that process to be brutal. Modern design daily. Love the built-ins. Is this licensed for commercial photography? Would love to feature the designer." Sloane's smile tightened. "I see so many questions," she chirped. "Which is great. We're going to be doing a full reveal soon with all the details, but for now, I just wanted to share the vibe." The architect queen comments were now being drowned out by, "Yeah, who is the AOR and what's the permit number?" Sloane, visibly flustered, ended the live feed abruptly. "Got to go. So much inspiration to capture. Love you all." The screen went black. "Amateur," I said. She thought social media was her kingdom. She did not realize it's just another public forum and the professionals are in the audience. An hour later, as if to re-establish control, she made her second fatal mistake. A new post appeared on her grid, a mood board for her new studio. It was a collage of linen swatches, paint chips, and brass fittings, and in the center, as the background, she had posted a high-resolution image of my original schematic overlay, the one showing the structural frame and the interior elevations. She must have stolen it from my old family server, or perhaps photographed it from a presentation I had once given Margot. I zoomed in. Liam saw it at the same time I did. "Oh, Sloane," he whispered. There in the bottom right corner, rendered in a 5% opacity gray, was my digital watermark, a Monroe Green Line Atelier Preliminary Design 2024. She had not even had the technical skill to spot it or remove it. She had just posted a signed confession of her infringement to her 50,000 followers. I picked up my phone. "Michael," I said when my IP attorney answered, "she's live from the house and just posted my watermarked schematics. File the TRO now. We have willful, active, and egregious infringement, and she's trespassing to do it. Request an emergency hearing." "Done," he said. The line clicked off. A temporary restraining order was not a suggestion. It was a court order backed by the threat of contempt charges and financial penalties. It would legally bar her from stepping foot on the property or posting a single image of it. The system was moving, and while the courts move at their own pace, the internet moves at the speed of light. Michael filed the TRO petition electronically. Within an hour, it was on the public court docket, and the micro-influencers, the ones who had been celebrating Sloane's new studio, noticed. Their world is built on a fragile ecosystem of authenticity and association. Being associated with a fraud, especially one with a public court filing against her, was poison. The hedging began. The blogger who had posted the savage video at the wedding quietly deleted it. Another who had a trial sponsorship with Sloane for a line of ceramics posted a new story. "Just a heads up, my partnership with Sloane House Harbor is on pause pending some, legal clarifications. I only work with brands that are 100% transparent and original." The trial deals, the ones Margot had clearly orchestrated the wedding stunt to cement, were evaporating. Then the next domino fell, a DM leak. Someone from Sloane's inner circle, likely one of the bloggers who now felt used, leaked their private group chat messages to a prominent Seattle gossip blog. The blog posted the screenshots with names redacted. Redacted one, "Margot is a genius. Using the wedding was an A+ move." Sloane Monroe DM. "I know," she said. "We have to cement your brand, and Ava's wedding is the perfect stage. No one will dare question it. Redacted too, totally. And the house is to die for. Ava's a good designer. I will give her that. Sloane Monroe DM. She designs. I inspire. Big diff. Margot's making sure the donors see that." There it was. Motive, premeditation, a clear conspiracy between Margot and Sloane to use my wedding to launch a brand based on my stolen work. The phrase "cement Sloane's brand" was now public. This leak did more than just damage Sloane. It hit Margot. On Thursday morning, I received a forwarded email from the same independent director at the Harbor Arts Alliance. It was from the Kenwood couple, the donors Margot had redirected back in 2019. Subject: our 2019 donation. "Dear Board, we are writing with deep concern. Our $1.5 million donation in 2019 was pledged specifically because of Ava Monroe's work on the waterfront shelter. We were convinced by Margot Monroe at the time to route it through the Civic Fund to support women in design. We are now seeing public reports and, frankly, disturbing gossip that Margot Monroe and her other daughter Sloane orchestrated a public event to strip Ava of credit for another one of her projects. This, combined with the anonymous packet we understand you are reviewing, makes us question the stewardship of our funds. Why has Ava Monroe's work never been credited by the Alliance? Where precisely did our donation go? We expect a full and transparent answer." Margot's pillars were now visibly cracking, the rebar of her lies exposed. It was time for my only public statement. I did not post on Instagram. I did not do a live feed. I wrote a 500-word blog post on the Green Line Atelier website. It was calm, professional, and educational. Title: The Unseen Structure, a Guide to Licensure, Copyright, and the Architect of Record. The post never mentioned Sloane. It never mentioned my family. It simply, in clean factual prose, explained what an architect of record AOR is, the legal liabilities an AOR assumes for a building's safety, the nature of architectural copyright under 17 U.S.C. Section 102, and the difference between a licensed design professional and a lifestyle brand founder or interior decorator. It was a quiet, authoritative primer on licensure basics. I posted it to my LinkedIn profile. That was all. The effect was not immediate, but it was decisive. 3 days later, a woman who had been commenting enthusiastically on Sloane's posts, a real client, posted a public, furious message on her own feed. "I am appalled. I put down a $10,000 deposit for a Sloane House harbor design consultation based on the waterfront studio," she posted. "I just read a blog post from the actual architect. It turns out Sloane Monroe has no license, no permits. She is not an architect at all. She is illegally using another woman's work as her portfolio. I have demanded a full refund for deceptive practices." The post, which tagged Sloane, the Attorney General, and the Better Business Bureau, went viral in the small, insular Seattle design community. Sloane's entire house of cards, built on Margot's hubris and my stolen plans, was collapsing in real time. Her final gambit was predictable. She pivoted to victim. Her Instagram profile was scrubbed of the mood board and the live video, no doubt on the frantic advice of a lawyer she had finally hired. They were replaced by a single tear-eyed video filmed not in my cottage, but in her bland apartment. "I have been attacked," she choked, dabbing at her eyes, "by people who are supposed to be my family. I am just a creative person trying to build something beautiful, and I am being buried in lawsuits by people who are jealous. This is not about a house. This is about them trying to silence my voice. Please do not believe the lies." It was a good performance. 10 years ago, it might have worked, but this was 2025. The comments under her video were not sympathetic. They were brutal. Commenter 1, "What lies? The court filings are public. Here's the link to the TRO petition." Commenter 2, "Attacked or served a cease and desist for posting the architect's watermarked plans." Commenter 3, "The lie is you calling yourself a designer. The truth is Ava Monroe's copyright registration. We see you." Sloane had brought the fight to social media, her home turf, and she was being annihilated. Her followers were not just disagreeing, they were citing the dockets. I closed the browser. I did not comment. I did not like a single post. I did not have to. I was in my studio finalizing the new proposal for the Green Line Riverwalk renewal. My work continued, the dockets were speaking, and their voice was louder than hers would ever be. The public-facing war with Sloane was a skirmish, a necessary diversion. The real war, the one for control of the entire system, was being fought in silence through spreadsheets and legal archives. While Sloane was busy imploding online, Liam had engaged his firm's forensic accountant, a woman named Julia, to do a deep dive on the one public document Margot could not hide, the Monroe Civic Fund's annual tax filings. Julia's report landed in my inbox on a Friday morning. It was a 40-page PDF, a monument to Margot's quiet, methodical greed. Liam and I reviewed it in my studio, the numbers glowing on the large monitor. "The pattern is consistent," Julia had written in her summary. "Over the past 8 years, since the 2017 governance change, the fund's administrative and event-related expenses have grown by 600%, while its grant disbursements have decreased by 70%. The majority of these expenses are payments to a small, recurring group of vendors for services billed at rates averaging 200 to 250% above market." She had attached an appendix. It was a list of the vendors: Premier Events, Bellevue Blooms Design, Ascot Catering. I recognized the names. The proprietors were all women in Margot's inner circle, the same ones who co-chaired her galas. It was exactly as I had suspected, a closed loop, using my grandfather's charitable fund as their personal slush fund, marking up invoices to pay for their own lifestyles under the guise of event costs. "It's not just unethical," Liam said, his voice tight with fury. "It's tax fraud, plain and simple." The report also included scanned copies of the board, minutes from the votes that approved these expenditures. And on every page under attendees were 2 names: Margot Monroe, chair, and Daniel Monroe, compliance witness. And under vote, the record was always the same: motion carries unanimously. My father had been in the room for every single fraudulent transaction. He had watched Margot bleed the fund dry and had signed his name to it over and over again. He had not just been a non-intervener, he had been a co-conspirator through his silence. But it was the final addendum of Julia's report that made the air in the room go still. It was a financial trace she had run on my own Social Security number, looking for any other intersections with the fund. She found one. In 2018, the year after Margot seized control, my 529 college savings plan, An account my grandfather had set up for me, which still had a considerable balance left over, was liquidated. A transfer of $87,450 was made from my account. The recipient was not another investment vehicle. The recipient was the Monroe Civic Fund. The memo line on the transfer read, Reinvestment, MMDM. I remembered 2018. Margot had hosted her most extravagant gala to date, a legacy ball with monogrammed everything from the ice sculptures to the cocktail napkins. Julia had cross-referenced the dates. The transfer from my 529 plan occurred 3 days before the final deposit was due for the venue. My mother had stolen my college fund to pay for a party. I did not feel rage. I felt a profound, chilling coldness. It was the feeling of an engineer discovering a structural flaw, not just in a single beam, but in the very foundation of the earth beneath the building. This was not just about my wedding or a house. This was my entire life. Ava, Liam said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. I need to find the original 529 paperwork, I said, my voice flat. Grandfather set it up. It would have been in the old family trust documents. I spent the rest of the day in the digital archives, a place I had avoided for years. I sifted through endless folders of estate plans, stock certificates, and property deeds, and that is when I found it. It was in a mislabeled folder titled Miss Harbor Works 1999. It was not the 529 plan, it was something else entirely, a separate dormant trust I had never heard of. The Harbor Works Legacy Trust. I opened the PDF. It was a simple 3-page document. The beneficial owner was named on the first page, Ava Elizabeth Monroe. Me. The assets were modest, a small portfolio of municipal bonds meant to grow over time. But it was not the assets that mattered. It was the governance. The trust had a protector clause. It is an uncommon but powerful legal tool, an independent third party who has the authority to oversee the trustee and, if necessary, remove them for breach of fiduciary duty. The named protector was a man I barely remembered, Ira Dalrymple, a retired attorney. I had a vague childhood memory of a quiet, kind man with thick glasses who always smelled of old books and peppermint. He had been my grandfather's personal lawyer, his closest confidant. I found his number in an old legal directory. He was living in a retirement community on Bainbridge Island. I called him. Mr. Dalrymple, I said after introducing myself. My name is Ava Monroe. I am Jonathan Monroe's granddaughter. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Ava, he said, his voice a dry rustle of paper. I have been wondering when you might call. I have been reading your name in the news. I found a document, I said. The Harbor Works Legacy Trust. It names you as the protector. Yes, he said. I am. And I have something for you. A letter your grandfather left in my care to be opened by you under specific circumstances. I believe those circumstances have now been met. Could you come to my office tomorrow? The next afternoon, I sat opposite Ira Dalrymple in his small, sunlit study. The smell of old books and peppermint was exactly as I remembered. He was older, frailer, but his eyes behind the thick glasses were sharp and intelligent. He slid a heavy, cream-colored envelope across his desk. My name was on it, written in my grandfather's familiar architectural script. Your grandfather was a brilliant man, Ava, Ira said. He loved your mother, but he was not blind. He saw her obsession with image, with social standing. He set up 2 funds. The Civic Fund was for public good. The Harbor Works Trust was for your protection. He feared Margot would one day conflate the two. I opened the letter. My dearest Ava, it began. If you are reading this, it means Ira has judged the time to be right. I have left you the Harbor Works Trust as a safeguard. But this letter concerns the Civic Fund. It is my legacy to the city I helped build, a city you, with your talent, will one day shape. But legacies are fragile. They can be corrupted. I have included a provision known only to Ira, tied to the protector clause of your trust. It is a failsafe. If the Monroe Civic Fund is ever used in a manner that demonstrably prioritizes image over impact, if it becomes a vehicle for vanity, for social climbing, for the enrichment of a few at the expense of the many, then the protector is not just empowered, but is required to remove the sitting trustee and seat you, the beneficial owner of the Harbor Works Trust, as the sole successor trustee of the Civic Fund. I looked up at Ira, my heart pounding. Image over impact, I whispered. It was the exact phrase. He was prescient, Ira said. For years I have watched Margot. The galas, the self-dealing. It was distasteful. But proving it met the legal standard of your grandfather's letter was difficult. It was internal. But what she did at your wedding was a public act. She attempted to use a charitable gift, your in-laws, to elevate Sloane's image, a direct act of self-dealing for reputational gain. That, combined with the donor complaints, now on the record with the Alliance, and the forensic accountant's report, well, these are no longer suspicions. They are objective, documented triggers. He placed another document on the desk. It was a single page, titled, Acceptance of Successor Trustee. Your grandfather's instructions are clear, Ira said. The conditions have been met. The decision is now yours. If you sign this, I will execute the change. Margot's control of the civic fund will be rescinded, effective immediately. This was it. The main pillar, the financial engine of Margot's entire social empire. Not just a legal challenge, but a complete and total reclamation, using a tool my grandfather had forged decades ago. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. I thought of the stolen scholarship, the redirected donors, the magazine feature that had erased me. I thought of my 529 plan liquidated to pay for monogrammed ice sculptures. I signed my name. It's done, Ira said, taking the document. He picked up his phone. Notices will go out to the bank, the Alliance Board, and to Margot and Daniel's attorney within the hour. I drove back to the city as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water. I did not feel triumphant. I felt a sense of profound, solemn responsibility. When I got back to the studio, I walked to the whiteboard. Under the reclaim phase, I drew a large box around the item labeled Civic Fund. I wrote complete next to it in black marker. Then I opened my laptop and drafted my first official directive as the new trustee of the Monroe Civic Fund. It was an email addressed to the fund's accountants and the Harbor Arts Alliance Board. Subject, New Governance, Monroe Civic Fund. Effective immediately, I have been seated as the successor trustee for the Monroe Civic Fund pursuant to the original trust instrument. My first two directives are as follows. 1. A full independent third-party audit of all financial activity from 2017 to the present is to be initiated. 2. A temporary moratorium is placed on all non-grant-related expenditures. The fund's purpose is to support arts and green spaces, not to underwrite galas. There will be no more vanity spending. A new era of transparent, impact-focused philanthropy for the fund begins today. Regards, Ava Monroe, Trustee, Monroe Civic Fund. I hit send. Margot's control was gone. Her private bank was closed. She just did not know it yet. The invitation was delivered by courier on a Monday morning. It was not a text message or a phone call. It was a single heavy cardstock sheet in a lined envelope, the kind used for formal announcements. You are requested to attend a private dinner. Tuesday, 7:00 p.m., the Cascade Room, the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Please be prompt. There was no signature. There did not need to be. It was a summons, and they would know who had sent it. The choice of venue was deliberate. The Fairmont was a bastion of old Seattle society, a place Margot considered her home turf, but the Cascade Room was a small, modern, soundproofed private dining space on an upper floor, a neutral box of gray walls, dark wood, and a single unadorned chandelier. It offered no strategic advantage. It was a boardroom disguised as a restaurant. I arrived 20 minutes early. I instructed the staff that there would be no service, no interruptions. The table was set for 4, but I had them remove the wine glasses. This was not a reconciliation. This was a final project review. I sat at the head of the table, my back to the wall, and placed 3 thick, crisp 9x12 envelopes on the polished surface in front of the empty chairs. My posture was straight. My breathing was even. I felt no anxiety, only the calm focus of a surgeon before the first incision. They arrived together, exactly at 7. Margot swept in first, a portrait of a grieved matriarchal power in a Chanel jacket. Sloane followed, her face a mask of defiant anger, her eyes red-rimmed from either crying or rage. My father, Daniel, trailed behind them both, looking gray and tired, a man already defeated. "Ava," Margot began, her voice sharp with accusation. "What is the meaning of this? This melodrama, the letters from your lawyers, the calls from the board. You are tearing this family apart. Please sit, I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the silent room. They hesitated, then took their seats. Sloane directly opposite me, my parents on either side. A perfect dysfunctional tableau. This is not a dinner, I said, gesturing to the empty table. This is a briefing. I have some materials for each of you. I slid the envelopes across the table. Each was labeled with a single name. Sloane snatched hers, tearing it open. Margot opened hers with a disdainful flick of her wrist. Daniel just stared at his as if it might bite him. You will find everything is self-explanatory, I said, my voice maintaining its cool, professional tenor. I suggest you review the contents carefully. I watched them. Sloane's eyes scanned the first page. It was the timeline, a detailed 2-column list. On the left, my projects and achievements dated. On the right, her corresponding brand milestones and Margot's social ascents. The Atherton scholarship split, the magazine feature, the Kenwood donation. It was the entire history of their parasitism laid out in cold, hard dates. Her face paled. She flipped to the next section, the licensing FAQs I had written for the Green Line blog, now printed and annotated with references to Washington State's deceptive trade practice statutes. The final pages were the proposal, the off-ramp I had designed for her. It was a formal settlement offer, in exchange for a full public retraction and apology on all her social platforms and a legally binding agreement to never again associate herself with my work or the cottage. My IP attorney would not pursue damages for willful copyright infringement. It was a chance to escape with her reputation merely bruised, not destroyed. Her hands began to tremble. Daniel finally opened his envelope. He did not find a proposal. He found photocopies. The first was the 2017 memo transferring control of the Civic Fund to Margot, his signature clearly visible at the bottom as compliance witness. The next was a series of minutes from the fund's board meetings approving the outrageous vendor invoices. Page after page, his name was listed, a silent party to his wife's fraud. The final document was a single blank sheet of paper attached to a sworn affidavit form. There was a note clipped to it in my handwriting. The historical record is clear. You have one opportunity to add your own testimony to it. The choice is yours. He stared at his own signature, the pen stroke that had enabled so much, and a deep, shuddering sigh escaped his lips. He looked, in that moment, 100 years old. Margot, meanwhile, was rifling through her documents with growing fury. The letter from Ms. Alvarez at the escrow office, formally notifying her of the administrative freeze, the notice from the Shoreline Permitting Office of a pending investigation, a printout of the email from the Alliance's board council calling for the special session and her recusal. These were irritants, problems she believed she could manage, bully her way through. Then she got to the last page. It was a copy of the acceptance of successor trustee I had signed in Ira Dalrymple's office. It was accompanied by a single physician clean letter from Ira's law firm, pursuant to the protector clause of the Harbor Works Legacy Trust and the specific triggering conditions outlined by the original truster, Jonathan Monroe. The trusteeship of the Monroe Civic Fund has been legally and irrevocably transferred to the designated successor, Ms. Ava Monroe. This change is effective immediately. All banking and governance authority for the fund now rests with her. The color drained from Margot's face. This she had not seen coming. This was not a lawsuit to be fought. It was a change that had already happened, a quiet, perfectly legal execution that had severed her from the source of her power and her money. The pillar had been removed. Her head snapped up, her eyes blazing with a wild, cornered fury. She found the only target she thought she could hurt. "This is them," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "This is the Harts, that grasping new money family. They put you up to this, did they not? They're trying to humiliate us. This is Elena Hart's doing." I did not answer. I did not raise my voice. I simply placed my phone on the center of the table, my thumb hovering over the screen. "You are right about one thing, Mother," I said. My voice was cold and clear as glass. "This is about humiliation, the one you engineered for me." I pressed play. Her own voice filled the silent room, amplified by the phone's speaker. "If I could have everyone's attention. The Harts have been so incredibly generous, a divine cottage. However, we have all agreed It's a wonderful solution that serves the entire family's needs. We are just so thrilled to announce that the cottage is being formally transferred to Sloan to family. The audio was pristine. The clink of glasses, the collective gasp of the guests, every syllable of her triumphant, treacherous speech echoed off the soundproofed walls of the private room. When it finished, the silence that fell was absolute. Sloan was staring at the table, her face ashen. Daniel had his eyes closed, his hand covering his mouth. Margot was looking at me, her mouth slightly agape, for the first time in her life, utterly speechless. She had been confronted not with an accusation, but with an irrefutable recording of her own actions. I stood up, pushing my chair back. The legs made a soft scraping sound on the hardwood floor. "I did not bring you here to negotiate," I said, looking at each of them in turn. My gaze lingered on my mother. "I brought you here to inform you of the consequences of your actions. What you do with the terms I have presented is up to you, but we are done. We are done negotiating my value in rooms where I am meant to be embarrassed. We are done with you using my work as your currency and my life as your stage." I picked up my purse. I did not slam the door. I did not make a grand exit. I simply turned and walked away, leaving them with the evidence of their betrayals and the gift-wrapped silence of their ruin. As the door clicked shut behind me, I allowed myself one final glance through the small glass window. The tableau was exactly as I had designed it. Sloan was trembling, her hand pressed to her mouth, the settlement offer shaking in her other hand. Daniel looked broken, a ghost in a suit, staring at the blank affidavit. And Margot was clutching the papers, the escrow freeze, the board inquiry, the notice of her own dethronement. She was holding the physical proof that the optics, the only thing she had ever truly valued, were slipping through her perfectly manicured fingers, and there was nothing she could do to stop them. The meeting in the Cascade Room was not a clean break. It was the final, critical fracture. The days that followed were about watching the structural load transfer and listening to the cracks propagate. The dominoes, which I had so carefully aligned, began to fall, not with a crash, but with the quiet, decisive clicks of institutional procedure. The first was the Harbor Arts Alliance. The special session Margot had been summoned to, combined with her sudden legally mandated removal from the Civic Fund, created a perfect storm. The board, composed of Seattle's corporate and social elite, was terrified of liability. The anonymous packet had given them the why, but my grandfather's trust in Ira's letter had given them the how. Margot was no longer just an ethical risk. She was a demonstrated fiduciary failure. On the Thursday after our dinner, the Alliance released a public statement. It was a masterpiece of corporate damage control. The Harbor Arts Alliance is committed to the highest standards of fiduciary responsibility and donor integrity. Pending an independent review of the governance of affiliated philanthropic bodies, the board has requested and accepted the temporary resignation of Margot Monroe as vice chair and as a member of the board of directors, effective immediately. Requested and accepted. They had given her the option to jump before she was pushed. The statement did not accuse her of wrongdoing. It simply prioritized donor integrity, a clear signal to the Kenwoods and other high-value patrons that their concerns were being heard. The pillar of her primary board seat was gone. The contagion was immediate. Reputations, like structures, are only as strong as their weakest point. The other boards Margot sat on, the Museum of Contemporary Art and the Waterfront Preservation Society, could not afford to be associated with an individual under review for financial misconduct. By Monday, both had followed suit. The museum thanked Margot for her years of service and announced she was stepping away to focus on family matters. The Preservation Society was more blunt, releasing a statement that its members must be above reproach and accepting her resignation. In less than a week, Margot Monroe had been systematically unseated from the very institutions that defined her. She was no longer a society chair, she was just a private citizen under investigation. I, in the meantime, moved in the opposite direction. I was now the trustee of the Monroe Civic Fund, and I would model the exact standard I demanded of others. My first act, as promised, was to hire a Big Four accounting firm to begin a full third-party forensic audit with the results to be made public. My second act was to post the fund's first-ever quarterly report on its new simple website. It was a transparent, pie chart-driven breakdown of all assets, and I issued my first new grant, a small, immediate cash disbursement to the very women's shelter Margot had diverted the Kenwood donation from. I was reversing the flow, redirecting the capital from image back to impact. This was when the media picked it up. Not the gossip blogs, but the serious press. The Puget Sound Business Journal and the local NPR affiliate were not interested in the family drama. They were interested in the mechanics. A financial columnist wrote an analysis piece titled, "How a Trust Protector Can Reverse Decades of Quiet Abuse." It was a deep dive into the legal instrument my grandfather had used. It interviewed Ira Dalrymple, who spoke only of the law, not the specifics, and 3 other estate attorneys. My name was mentioned only as the successor trustee, a respected Seattle architect. The story was not about a family feud. It was a public service announcement for donors and beneficiaries, explaining how to spot and fight fiduciary self-dealing. Margot's name was now synonymous with quiet abuse. The pressure on Sloan, which had been building online, became unbearable. The TRO was in effect. The Attorney General's office had sent her a formal inquiry. And now, the final nail, the city's Department of Construction and Inspections. Acting on my professional query, a city permitting official issued a formal notice of potential violations to Sloan House Harbor LLC. It was delivered to her apartment. A copy was sent to me as the AOR. It cited her for misleading clients and advertising unpermitted commercial use of a residential critical shoreline property. It came with a threat of significant daily fines. She was trapped. She was barred from the cottage. Her brand was toxic. Her sponsors were gone, and she was being investigated by both the state and the city. She had no moves left. The white flag came on a Tuesday night in the form of a shaky self-shot video posted to her Instagram, the one she had used to build her victim narrative. This time there were no tears. She just looked exhausted. "Hi, everyone," she started, her voice small. "I need to make a correction. I have been unclear about my work. The truth is, I am not an architect. I am not a licensed designer." She took a shaky breath. "The waterfront cottage was designed by my sister Ava Monroe. She is the architect. I am not. My Sloan House Harbor brand will be taking a long pause as I reevaluate. I am sorry for all the confusion. I am sorry." She had finally accepted the terms of the settlement I had offered. The truth was out. In her own words, the public retraction was complete. I watched the comments roll in. The vitriol was gone. The internet mob, having drawn blood, was now surprisingly kind. This took guts. Good luck. Truth is always the best path. Heal up. Respect for this. Hope you find your way. The truth, it turned out, cooled the heat. With no lie to fight, the internet's rage dissipated. Sloane's public humiliation was over, replaced by a quiet public reckoning. The next day, a package arrived at my office, a messenger-delivered envelope from Daniel's attorney. Inside was the affidavit I had given him, now filled out in my father's unsteady handwriting and bearing the stamp of a notary. It was a full confession. He admitted to his passive compliance in the 2017 governance change. He admitted he had harbored deep concerns about Margot's vendor invoices, but had chosen not to act in the interest of marital peace. He admitted he knew my 529 plan had been liquidated for the gala and that he had regretted his silence ever since. It was a pathetic document, a monument to a lifetime of cowardice. I felt nothing as I read it, no pity, no anger, not even the satisfaction of victory. It was just data. I scanned it, saved it to the legal server, and instructed my attorney to file it with the court as a supporting exhibit for my eventual petition. I recorded the fact. I did not gloat. Margot, however, would not go quietly. She was a creature of the stage, and with all her institutional stages now denied her, she sought the only one left, the media. She sat down for a glossy sit-down interview with a local lifestyle magazine's web channel, the kind of softball environment she had once commanded. It backfired spectacularly. She tried to spin the narrative she had failed to launch at the dinner. She was the victim, attacked by a cold, ungrateful daughter and manipulative in-laws. She spoke of family misunderstandings and business jealousies. But the outlet, in an attempt at balanced journalism, did something Margot had not anticipated. They juxtaposed her interview clips with split screens of the public filings. As Margot said, this was a simple family misunderstanding about a gift, The screen showed the actual text of the Hart Family Trust's reversion clause. As she said, "My work in this city speaks for itself," the screen showed the Harbor Arts Alliance's statement on donor integrity. As she said, "Sloan is a brilliant creative force," the screen showed the official notice of potential violations from the city. She was not a sympathetic matriarch. She was a documented liar, refuted in real time by her own paper trail. The interview was a disaster. It was the last public statement she would make. Through all of this, I was at work. While my family's drama flared and faded, I was doing what I had always done. I was building. The week Margot's interview aired, Green Line Atelier was in the final round of presentations for the Lake Union Riverwalk renewal, a massive multi-million-dollar public-private partnership to revitalize a huge stretch of the city's waterfront. It was the biggest project of my career. I stood before the city council and a panel of citizen architects, my rolled plans under my arm. I spoke of sustainable materials, of public access, of water reclamation, and of structures built to last 100 years. I spoke of building bridges, not burning them. We won the contract. The next day, my name was in the Seattle Times, but it was not about my family. It was on the front page of the business section. "Green Line Atelier wins landmark Riverwalk contract," the headline read. The photo was of me and my partners smiling, hard hats on the deck of the site. On the internet, however, it began to move on. The gossip blogs found new scandals. Sloan's apology video faded into the digital ether. Margot Monroe was yesterday's news. The social drama was over, but the courts were not. The audit of the Civic Fund was just beginning. The TRO against Sloan was waiting to be made permanent. The title audit for the cottage was still frozen, awaiting a final declaration from a judge. The internet may have had a short attention span, but the wheels of justice, which I had set in motion, grind slowly, and they were grinding exceedingly fine. The audit of the Civic Fund was a slow grinding process. The legal motions were inching their way through the court's congested calendar. In the quiet lull between the initial shock waves and the final legal resolution, I focused entirely on the Riverwalk project. It was a relief to immerse myself in the clean, honest world of structural engineering and public spaces. I was designing a place for the city, a legacy of connection, while the toxic legacy of my family was being methodically dismantled in the background. It was during this period of calm that Ira Dalrymple called me again. "Ava," he said, his voice warm, "I hope I am not disturbing you. I believe it's time we reviewed the final piece of your grandfather's architecture." I met him again in his sunlit study. He had a file on his desk that I had not seen before. "Your grandfather, as we have discussed, was a man who believed in sound structures," Ira began. "He built the Civic Fund for the public and the Harbor Works Trust for your protection. But he also understood that land itself has a purpose, an intent." He slid a document across the desk. It was not a trust. It was a deed, specifically the Monroe Legacy Deed of Intent, filed with the county recorder's office 3 months before my wedding. It was attached as a permanent covenant to the specific shoreline parcel where the cottage stood, the land the Harts had purchased from a holding company my grandfather's estate had set up years ago. They had bought the land, but the land had come with rules. I read the recital clause, the legal language that sets out the purpose of the document. My breath caught in my throat. This parcel of shoreline, having been stewarded by the Monroe family, is intended to support and be in service to the advancement of innovative architectural design. Its primary purpose is to support the work of the architect whose designs animate it, providing a living example of sustainable and thoughtful shoreline development. Ira tapped a paragraph further down the page. "And here," he said softly, "is the keystone." The paragraph specified the architect by name. The architect referenced herein for the purposes of this intent is defined as Ava Elizabeth Monroe. This stewardship is granted based on her demonstrated professional merit and her unique design vision for this specific parcel. It is a grant of purpose, not of bloodline. My grandfather had done it years before the Harts ever bought the land, years before Margot ever conceived of her plan. He had legally and permanently tied the land's very purpose to me, and not as his granddaughter, but as a professional architect. The house was not just a gift from the Harts, it was a legacy of stewardship from him. The Harts were made aware of this when they purchased the land, Ira explained. It is why they were so adamant that the cottage be built to your exact specifications. They were honoring the donor's intent. Robert and Elena are people of integrity. What does this mean legally for what is happening now? I asked. It means everything, Ira said. It provides the court with a clear, recorded statement of intent that predates the entire conflict. Sloane's public claims to the cottage as her studio are now in direct contradiction to the deed's stated purpose. I have already instructed the escrow officer to file an affirmation of intent use with the court attaching this deed. It makes Margot's actions even more self-destructive. I saw the devastatingly brilliant architecture of it. The reversion clause, I whispered. In the Hart family trust. Precisely, Ira nodded. If the court finds that the intended architect, you, is being displaced or the property's purpose is being misrepresented, it could trigger the reversion. The entire asset would revert to the Hart family trust, free and clear. Margot's public microphone moment, her grand attempt to seize the cottage for Sloane, has now created the legal argument that could cause her to lose the asset entirely, even if you and Liam were to walk away. She played the game so recklessly that she endangered the very prize she was trying to steal. The final hidden structural support of my grandfather's design was now revealed. It was magnificent. The weight of this new reality must have settled over the other side as well, because the day after the affirmation was filed, my father called me. He did not ask to meet at a restaurant. He asked if he could come to my office at Green Line. He wanted to meet on my ground. He sat in one of the client chairs, looking small and insignificant against the backdrop of my work, schematics for the Riverwalk, material samples for a new ferry terminal. I read the deed, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Your grandfather's deed of intent. I had forgotten about it. I said nothing. I just waited. There's something you need to know, he said, not looking at me, but at his own hands, twisting in his lap. It was years ago, after you won that first student award, the one Margot had them split. She was angry that night, not at you, but at the situation. He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a lifetime of weary regret. She said to me, if Ava's projects all carry her name, if she becomes known for her own work, Sloane will never matter. She will just be the other sister. It was not about the money, Ava. It was never about the house. It was about Sloane's name. She was trying to build a brand for Sloane on top of your foundation because she did not think Sloane could ever build one for herself. There it was, the motive, finally spoken aloud. The truth of it was both pathetic and profoundly sad. It was the core design flaw of our family. I looked at my father, this man whose silence had been the mortar for my mother's destructive architecture. I felt no impulse to comfort him. Thank you for telling me, I said, my voice even. I have one task for you and only one. I need you to show up in court, sit on the witness stand, take an oath, and say exactly what you just told me on the record. His face went pale. Ava, your mother. This is not a negotiation, I interrupted, my voice hardening for the first time. This is your one and only chance to put a single truthful beam back into the collapsing structure of your own integrity. Say it on the record, or you and I will have nothing more to say to each other ever again. He stared at me, then gave a slow, defeated nod. The final piece of the opposition crumbled 2 days later, not with a phone call, but with an email. It was from Sloane. The address was her personal account, not the defunct Sloane House Harbor one. The subject line was simply, question. Ava, I have seen the deed of intent. I understand now. I have retracted everything online, and my lawyer has sent the formal apology to yours. If I agree to pay for all of your legal fees related to the TRO and the IP filings, would you consider letting me live in the cottage? Not as a studio, just as a home, as a tenant. I will pay whatever the market rent is. Sloane? It was a complete and total surrender. The swagger was gone. The branding was gone. She was just a woman who had lost everything and was asking for shelter. I had the power to refuse, to leave her with nothing. But my project plan had a boundary rule, no collateral damage. My goal was not annihilation, it was correction. I spent an hour with my attorney drafting the terms. We created a standard month-to-month tenancy agreement. The rent was set at the full fair market value for a property of that caliber. There was a strict no commercial activity clause, forbidding any photography, filming, or business use of any kind. A no misattribution clause stated that any public mention of her residence must credit me as the owner and architect. And the final, most important clause, the lease was subject to annual renewal at the sole discretion of the landlord. I would own the house, and she would live there only with my permission. I sent it to her. She signed it and returned it within the hour. For the first time in her life, Sloane was facing a consequence, but it was not an annihilation. It was just an invoice, a bill for the damages she had caused, and a monthly rent check that would serve as a constant reminder of who the architect really was. My lawyer called Margot's attorney with the news. Sloane has settled. Ava is willing to offer Margot a similar off-ramp, a quiet dismissal of all claims in exchange for a binding agreement to cease all contact and public comment. The response came back a day later. Ms. Monroe refuses all settlement offers. She intends to see you in court. Of course she did. I had taken her board seats, her money, and her legacy. All she had left was her pride. She still wanted the stage, and I was going to give it to her. The King County Superior Courthouse is a place of hard surfaces and muted colors, gray marble floors, acoustic ceiling tiles, and the heavy dark wood of the benches and the judge's dais. It is a building designed to absorb emotion, to strip a conflict down to its bare, verifiable facts. It was the perfect final stage for this performance. We were not in a dramatic trial with a jury. I had petitioned for declaratory relief, a clean, surgical legal action where a petitioner asks the court simply to declare the rights of the parties involved. I was not suing for money. I was not asking for damages. I was asking a judge to look at the mountain of paper I had assembled and state for the permanent record what was true. Margot sat at the respondent's table with her attorney, a man with a weary expression who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. She was dressed in a severe navy blue suit, an actress playing the part of a serious businesswoman, but the mask was cracking. Her hands were clenched tightly on the table, her knuckles white. Sloane was not there. As part of her settlement, she was not required to attend. Liam sat beside me, a silent, solid presence. Our attorney, a calm, methodical woman named Ms. Chen, had a stack of indexed binders in front of her. It was my entire project plan translated into the language of legal exhibits. Your Honor, Ms. Chen began, her voice clear and steady. We are here today to ask for clarity. This is not a case about family feelings, it is a case about the integrity of legal instruments. We have filed a petition for declaratory relief on 4 points. She laid them out one by one. First, that the title to the shoreline cottage should vest to Ava Monroe and Liam Hart, as per the explicit terms of the Hart Family Settlement Trust F12. Second, that the court should affirm the Monroe legacy deed of intent recognizing the property's purpose is to support my work. Third, that the court should issue a permanent injunction against Margot and Sloane Monroe, prohibiting them from claiming authorship of my designs or using my portfolio for their own commercial gain. And fourth, that the court should formally recognize my legal appointment as the successor trustee of the Monroe Civic Fund. The evidence supporting our petition is, we believe, unambiguous, Ms. Chen said. She began to build the structure piece by piece for the judge. We present to the court Exhibit A, the Hart Family Settlement Trust F12, with its clear vesting conditions and reversion clause. Exhibit B, the Monroe Legacy Deed of Intent, recorded months before the wedding, stating the land's purpose is to support the work of Ava Monroe by name. Exhibit C, my client's intellectual property certificates from the U.S. Copyright Office for the architectural works in question. Exhibit D, a complete timeline of the escrow freeze initiated by my client's formal notice of a potential cloud on title. Exhibit E, the audio-visual recording from the wedding reception in which the respondent Margot Monroe makes a public false claim regarding the transfer of the asset. At this, Margot's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, we object. This is a family matter, a simple misunderstanding at an emotional event. Playing a tape from a wedding is unnecessary theatricality. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, looked down from the bench. Counselor, your client is the one who chose to make a public declaration at a theatrical event. The court is interested in what was declared. Objection overruled. Play the recording. Ms. Chen played the clip. Margot's bright, trilling voice filled the solemn courtroom. The gasps of the guests. Sloane's chirped dismissal. It was all there. Margot sank lower in her chair, her face turning a blotchy red. That misunderstanding, Your Honor, Miss Chen continued smoothly, formed the basis for the respondent's daughter, Sloane Monroe, to launch a commercial brand. Exhibit F, a complete archive of social media posts, including a video of Miss Monroe trespassing on the property and a post in which she uses my client's watermarked schematic to solicit business. She went on, her voice a relentless, dispassionate metronome of fact, the cease and desist order, the notices from the Shoreline Permitting Office, the notarized affidavit of Daniel Monroe admitting his complicity, Sloane Monroe's signed retraction, and her new tenancy agreement, in which she acknowledged me as the owner and architect, the letters from the boards accepting Margot's resignations, the official notice of my appointment as trustee for the civic fund executed by the trust protector. It was an avalanche of paper, a fortress of documentation. When it was Margot's attorney's turn, he had nothing. He tried to argue intent. He tried to argue family dynamics. He spoke of a mother's love, of a desire to help both her daughters. The judge listened patiently, her fingers steepled. When he was finished, she looked down at Margot. "Ms. Monroe," the judge said, her voice cutting through the silence. "For years, you have operated in a world of whispers, of social pressure, of optics. But this is a courtroom. In here, we do not operate on optics. We operate on evidence." She picked up a copy of the Hart Family Trust. "You seem to be under the impression that a speech can transfer property. Let me be unequivocally clear. Microphones do not transfer title. Trusts and filings do. Your public declaration did not transfer the cottage to your daughter. It triggered a reversion clause that protected it from your interference." She then delivered her ruling, a swift, systematic demolition of Margot's entire world. On the first point, the court finds for the petitioners. The title to the property at address is hereby affirmed to vest to Ava Monroe and Liam Hart, pursuant to the terms of Trust F12. The escrow freeze is lifted for the sole purpose of executing this vesting. On the second point, the court affirms the Monroe Legacy Deed of Intent as a binding covenant. The purpose of this land is to support the architectural work of Ms. Ava Monroe. On the third point, a permanent injunction is issued. Margot Monroe and Sloane Monroe are hereby prohibited in perpetuity from claiming design authorship, either explicitly or by implication, of any of Ms. Ava Monroe's architectural works, and are prohibited from soliciting any work based on her portfolio. On the fourth point, the court recognizes the legal and binding replacement of the trustee for the Monroe Civic Fund. Ms. Ava Monroe is affirmed as the sole successor trustee. Furthermore, the court orders the independent audit to proceed to its conclusion. If evidence of criminal fraud emerges, this court will not hesitate to make a referral to the district attorney's office. Finally, she looked at me. "And for the record, Ms. Monroe, the shoreline use covenant you filed is upheld. Any material changes to that property will require your sign-off. Your pen, it seems, is the real key to that house." It was over. A complete and total victory. On every single point. Outside the courthouse, a small cluster of reporters was waiting. The story had become a minor local sensation, a society drama with a legal twist. Cameras flashed as we stepped out into the bright, watery Seattle sunlight. "Miss Monroe! Miss Monroe! Do you have a comment on the ruling? Are you happy with the outcome? What do you have to say to your mother?" I did not say a word. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out several copies of the judge's final stamped orders. I handed them to the reporters. "The court's ruling is public record," I said calmly. "It speaks for itself. Let paper speak." Behind me, Margot and her lawyer emerged. The reporters swarmed toward her, a sea of microphones and cameras, and in that moment, her old instincts took over. She saw the audience, the stage. She lunged forward, pushing past her attorney, her mouth open, ready to give the speech of her life, to spin the narrative one last time. But her lawyer was faster. He caught her arm, a firm, gentle grip. "Margot, no," he murmured, his voice low but firm. "It's over." She looked at the microphones, then back at him, her face a mask of utter bewilderment. For the first time, there was no mic for her to take. Her stage had been dismantled. I turned away. I did not need to see the rest. Liam took my hand, his fingers lacing through mine. We walked down the marble steps and into the light. I had the stamped court orders tucked under my arm, rolled tight like a set of architectural plans. The house was beautiful, a masterpiece of glass and cedar nestled on the shore. But as we walked away from the courthouse, I knew with the certainty of a foundation settled on bedrock that the house had never really been the point. Integrity was, and the structure holds. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please drop a comment below and let us connect and share our thoughts.